Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast 829. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camper. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
Exactly what I need you to do. Tonight, for your kind consideration, we're going to cover F1 news. Well, mainly, I might add. Yeah, we will. We'll cover some. But before doing that, I have to introduce my co-host, which means I have to go all the way to the right coast of our nation, nestled in our nation's capital, no less, where she does really important things. And I don't know this for a fact, but I'm going to guess with limited resources and overworked. That's what I'm going to say. But anyway, you know her, you love her. The lovely, the redoubtable Grace, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Todd. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
I think everybody's overworked with not enough resources. It's just the way of the world now.
It is the way of the world. Yeah. Yay.
Great.
Woo. So, Grace,
Todd, what's up?
Well, we had a little texting over the weekend, and
we did.
And we texted because we were watching a race, but we weren't watching Formula One. I was watching MotoGP along with you regularly, and then the sports coverage or whatever just left YouTube TV or whatever. I'm like, well, that's great. So anyway, I can watch it again. And I watched the MotoGP. It was a terrific and close racing.
Amazing. Yeah,
it was a great race. Yeah. And so I've been completely out of the loop because I didn't know, and I haven't been following MotoGP. My apologies. But they did have a sprint race. Now they've got sprint races over in MotoGP on Saturday. And on the surface, that was great because they didn't have anything to worry. They didn't have to worry about the tires. It was just absolutely 100% push from word go.
Yes.
And so that was what, 12 laps, half race, right?
Yeah. Half an hour. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun to watch that. And sure, the Ducatis are dominant. There's no doubt about that. I mean, they'd chew everybody up down those long straights, but the winning margin was only 0.6. And I'm sure there was a gap between riders of 1 or 2 seconds, but really when you're watching it, in no time during the race did you feel like it was going to be a complete walk-off type thing.
Oh.
I mean, before Marquez, hit everybody. Here he is. He was down in fourth, and he claws it back, and he goes down underneath, and so that's the thing about MotoGP. You get a 2-second gap, and they can erase that pretty quick. And so anyway, it was exciting to the very end. Now I say all that, and I did read a little bit after the race. And I promise everybody's going to be like, why are we talking about MotoGP?
Listen, no, people, listen. You listen, you learn, you enjoy, you watch MotoGP. Calm down.
Right. And if you're a newer fan to F1 and you haven't watched MotoGP, do, because that's close, exciting racing. Period.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you'll be watching it and say, "Wow, I wish the F1 cars would battle this much." Right?
Right.
It's great.
And it's very easy to see visually, right? Like, I think that's one of the things, like with Formula One, you can't just like sit down and watch it, and you could watch it and be like, why do I care about this? But MotoGP, you can just watch a race and you're like, wow, I care about this. I get it.
Yeah. But I promise there is a F1 tie-in to this, a very profound emotional tie-in.
And it's always a big emotion.
Yeah, it's always a big emotion. So anyway, now having said this about the sprint race, I'm glowing about it. I did read it, and to be fair, half the grid is injured at this point.
Yeah, so yes, they have now taken out both of the big storylines coming into this, into the whole season are gone in one weekend, and they have to race again in Argentina. So, Bezzecchi went out. He's Pecco Bagnaia, who's the world champion. He's his new teammate, but he's not, what is the word? Like, he doesn't, like we talk, there's no team orders between those two. Maybe that's you know what I mean? Like, Bagnaia is just going to be like, yo, Pecca, middles, right? Like, there's no love lost between those two. And so I think that that's going to be part of that. Well, we won't know because he broke his shoulder in the sprint race.
Yep.
Great. And then Mark Marquez, as you alluded to in the actual race, when he ran into Oliveira, the hometown Portugal hero, and took him off the bike, but he broke one of the metacarpals in his hand, so he won't be racing in Argentina either. So it's like,
and neither will Oliveira.
No, Oliveira might have some time before he can race again. But I think those were the two big storylines coming into this, was like, right. What is Pecco's teammate going to do? And what are we going to have with Mark Marquez? And we just won't know for a while now.
Yeah,
so,
I know. So you got half the grid injured. That was
Oh, yeah.
And,
it was.
There is a little bit of chrome coming off this whole concept of their sprint race. I'm glowing about it. But, well, from the outside watching it, it seemed very exciting. I can't lie.
Yeah. I mean,
but the riders aren't actually convinced of the risk versus the lower points and fewer positions. And I could see that, Grace. I could see some concern there. Every time they get on those bikes, they're risking life and limb.
I mean, and they have a sprint race every weekend. Yeah. It's not like Formula One where it's just like, 5, and we'll just race some at Brazil. It's every weekend. They have 42 races now, basically.
Yeah. It's a great point. So this year is the biggest, the longest races, the longest of any in history. 21 races, 42 if you count the sprint races. And so these riders are going to be thinking about that. And the reason I bring it up that, half the grid's injured is it's a really good point about the sprint races. Whereas, getting a sprint race with F1, you could argue, rightfully so, that it's dangerous. It is, but you're more apt to break bodywork, front wings, that kind of thing, than you are your legs, your arms, your collarbones, those kind of things, your hands, and that kind of thing in MotoGP. So, yeah, there is a cost-benefit analysis there.
And I think the other thing, too, is that the riders aren't being financially compensated for this. A lot of this came after their contracts had been written, right? And so we talk about performance bonuses, right? You have those in Formula One, you have those in most sports. Like if you get X number of points, you get X number of dollars. And the riders are like, yo, this should count. And the teams are like, yo, these didn't exist. You don't get, money for this. So I think not only are they out there, life and limb, they're not really being compensated for this at all. And I think that, could you imagine if we went to Saudi Arabia and we didn't have like Lewis and we didn't have Checo and we didn't have Magic Alonso and, who's watching this race? At some point, there just aren't enough backup riders at these teams because I don't know. After we watched the sprint race, I don't think my heart can take this. And we have another race, right? Argentina, it's a back-to-back. It was just like, I need to go lie down in a dark room for a while.
I know.
It was a little stressful.
I could see, and like I said, this is an F1 podcast, but I could see where that's an issue. And and there was another issue, and then I swear I'll get off MotoGP, but
I'm not, so it's fine.
There was also some comments that I thought around the sprint race thing, in that some riders, just like in F1, some riders are sort of race pace long run riders,
right?
And some are qualifying heroes. Just like F1, you've got drivers that do really well at race pace and in long races, but there's other drivers that do really well in qualifying. Right? Their qualifying laps are fantastic, and they drift backwards in the race. But in MotoGP, I think that's probably even exacerbated more. There are some riders that are fantastic at that single lap pace or short race pace, whereas there's other ones that really know how to use the tires, let the tires, manage that tire, and then let it bring in and make a run at the end. So, there's some legit concerns. I'll be very intrigued to see how the series deals with this, if at all.
I think Jack Miller is the only person. He is he's crazy, right?
Yeah, was like, hell yeah.
Jack Miller's Australian in every way. He's just, this to him, is great. And he's on a KTM now, not a Ducati. He got, demoted. And so I think for him, this is great. But I think that MotoGP races, again, just like I think all sports, I watch a lot of basketball, so that's always kind of my go-to. But when you start watching a basketball game, there's the first quarter and everybody's kind of all over the place, and it kind of settles and everybody kind of gets their position and we kind of know what we're doing. And then you get to the end and there's a lot of excitement again, right? The same thing happens in MotoGP. There's sort of the beginning of, that first lap and everybody's kind of dogging for position, and then it kind of settles down a little bit, and then you get to the last 10 or 7 laps, and then people's tires start to wear off, and then we always talk about famously Rossi just waits, and he just sits at your shoulder and is just like, hey, I'm right here. Oh, your tires are bad? Fine, I'll just go right around you, right? So you just don't have any of that tire deg. Doesn't figure into it at all when you watch the sprint races. But man, it's just a little too. Everybody just went for it because there's no reason to wait. There's no reason to be patient. You got to go.
Yeah, they were, and they went. I mean, every one of those guys sent it.
Yeah, and I think that Marquez already. I don't know, races on the edge, I'll say. Some would call him very dangerous, but I think that when you're in the front, that's one thing. But him coming up through the pack, and especially how bad the Honda is right now, it's just going to keep happening. And this is just a disaster waiting to happen over and over again. So
yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they end up with all the original writers.
I don't know. I just think, it is crazy. I mean, we'll see what Argentina looks like. I just think
right.
I don't know. Maybe it'll end up just being, Pekka Bagnaia because he's front, right? And he just takes off and he goes. And, Fabio Quartararo, because it always takes him kind of a couple races to kind of like get his sea legs under the Yamaha. And then it'll just be the two of them. And that'll be what we really want to watch anyway.
Right. So anyway, if you aren't watching MotoGP, it's absolutely a great series and you should watch it. I think you'd really enjoy it for sure. All right. Here's my big tie-in. So the big tie-in, and I posted this, so I'm sure the keen-eyed among those who watch both F1 and MotoGP saw that Stefano Domenicali was at the MotoGP.
Friend of the show.
Stefano Domenicali.
Yes.
Longtime friend of the show.
Right? Not a friend of Red Bull, but a friend of the show.
Yeah, right. He was at the MotoGP race. And not only was he there, but he got to wave the checkered flag.
He sure did.
And so he knows good racing.
With his little sweater. Why did he still have his little sweater on? I don't know.
What was going on with the whole sweater thing? That was weird. It went really tightly under his arms. It didn't drape over. And it was almost like somebody came up behind him and took the arms and tied him in a knot behind him.
I'm sure that's what happened, right? Like, because, right, he just, like ties it over his shoulders, right? Like, but that's just going to like, woo, like you have a little cape. That's going to be a bad idea, right? So I'm sure somebody was like, you're going to wear that and like tied him up in it. It was really.
Tie up. Yeah.
Just take it off.
Really weird.
It was very weird.
Straight. So anyway, he was there.
Yes.
He was talking, as one does.
Yes.
And he had made some comments about Formula One that we're going to talk about. In particular, he talked about practice in Formula One. And here's what he had to say, which has sent off a bit of a debate in the socials. He said, quote, "I am a supporter of the cancellation of free practice sessions, which are of great use to the engineers, but that the public doesn't like," end quote.
All right. So I saw this on the Twitterverse, and I quickly found a picture of Domenicali when he was team principal at Ferrari, and I put, but I bet this guy doesn't agree with that. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, to me, this was like, I think Domenicali's just like saying whatever, right? Like, it's very like, you like bananas, I like bananas. What? You like oranges? We like oranges this week. Like, I think he's just like throwing out anything he can, and he's just saying stuff and seeing what kind of sticks. And I just saw this was like, yeah, maybe now you do, because now you're pandering to the fans, right? So that's your agenda is aimed at the fans. So of course, maybe they don't want to watch free practice, but I'm pretty sure when you were a Ferrari team principal, you would have been like, oh, clutching your pearls. What?
Yes.
The engineers, how will we build our car if you take away our free practice, right? Like, so, really, man, you're just playing to the audience that you have at this moment.
I know. Yeah, it reminded me of the days when Bernie Ecclestone would just say stuff like, maybe we ought to just switch and have medals.
Yeah.
Or, what races add more excitement? I mean, let's just
sprinklers. I know. He just, whatever.
It'd get everybody in a tizzy, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's talking about F1 and sprinklers and how asinine it was and blah, blah, blah. But everybody was talking about Formula One.
That's right. That's all Bernie wanted.
So I know they tend to like this notion of variability and adding more spice to the show. And they feel that all the teams have the track data already. But in my mind, and color me reactionary here, but if you have to prevent cars from running on track until the green lights, and you have to stick DRS on them and some dodgy tires, you may have a technical regulation issue more than you do a practice issue.
Right.
Just my opinion. And it just seems to me that, I mean, I know the teams have the track data, but drivers need time to acclimate to the track. You know, asphalt and track conditions change over the
Right.
years, especially the rookies. You know, maybe some of them haven't even raced at some of these tracks. And teams need to ensure that the cars that they have reassembled are safe to drive and in
Right.
safe condition as they drive them in anger, right? And so I'd hate to have no practice sessions, and the only time you could determine if something was right is the installation lap. And so that seemed a little
Yeah,
weird.
that's problematic. It's a little late to do anything at that
A
point.
little late to
right?
do anything, right? Yeah. So, so I wrote an article about this at the website, and I was thinking, you know, look, if you're really, I, I was beside myself when they shortened practice sessions
Yeah.
because I loved, but I'm a bit of an anorak, but I loved the practice sessions because there was a whole lot of time to unpack the sport, talk about the tech, talk about, you know, people they've talked in the paddock, share some rumors. There was just a lot of content that comes out of that.
Right.
But if you're hell bent to mess with it, I was saying, all right, look, all right, so make free practice 1 is actually practice for Sunday's Grand Prix with all the tire compounds.
Mm-hmm.
Free practice 2 would be the practice for the sprint race. But like MotoGP, have a sprint tire
Right.
that doesn't degrade. It's super grippy. It doesn't wear out. It doesn't have this heat cycle window about this big that they got to figure out to make it work. Just make a all-purpose, absolute sprint race tire compound where they go at it 100% right when the green lights go out, right? And then free practice 3 on Saturday is actually qualifying for the sprint race, right?
Right.
And then the sprint race is qualifying for the Grand Prix on Sunday. And then the Grand Prix, Sunday's a normal race,
Grand Prix.
set by the sprint race, right? So
Right.
there's an alternate if you don't like practice. But I think there's some serious concerns about just chucking it all out. And I'm curious also, I'm not quite sure if I asked you, do you dislike practice? I know you'd say no. Paul would say no. I'd say no. Everybody I know would say
It's
no.
not for me though.
Yeah, right. So who is it?
It's for the engineers. It's for the teams. It's for them to set up the cars. I mean, I agree with you.
No, but I mean, what fans are, when he talks about the fans don't like it, what fans? Who doesn't like it?
I mean, if I'm going to the track, I will watch all
I
of
want
it.
to see cars run
All of it. All the time.
for a long time.
I am there from 7 until 4 every
Me too.
day. All the
And
time.
That's why practice is great because you can see the teams run for an hour
Yeah.
and a half each session. You know,
Right.
you could track timing, track programs, guess on fuel weight. That was part of the fun. It was like scoring a baseball game, right?
Well, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head right there, right? I mean, I think that a lot of people find that very boring. But the fact that
Yeah.
I am a statistician who works with a lot of statisticians, they do not. That's how
Right,
a lot of
right.
interact statisticians exist. It's through baseball. So,
Yeah.
but I think that I think he's just throwing stuff out there. And I don't know. I mean, I agree with you. Like if you're trying to spice up the racing, this isn't how you do it. Or if you
No.
think they have all the data, like I agree with you. Like this is just not like now we're just not going to give them track time. Seems like the worst idea. I mean, there probably is. I was reminded of a conversation. I can't remember the context of this conversation, but it was when the three of us were on a podcast. And I remember asking Paul, like, well, how long does an engineer need to fix a car? Like, what is that time limit? And he's like, however much time you give an engineer is how much time they will work on it. Right. So, I mean, there probably is some place, but if they're going to give them time to work on it, they're going to work on it. And of course, they're going to be spending all this time trying to get milliseconds. It's
Yeah,
Formula
sure.
One. Milliseconds
Yeah.
is what we work in, right? This isn't, I don't know, karting or something. So I just think it's not really the answer, but I don't think he really meant it as an answer. I really think he just, just throwing spaghetti on that wall and seeing what sticks. And rather than explaining why it's necessary, it's not like, I guess, I assume that somebody didn't come up to him and go, hey, Stefano, why do we need free practice? That's,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, but instead of saying, here's why we have these things, here's why they're important. I used to be a team principal. This is what we use them for. He's just like, nah, they don't need that. Like, get rid of it.
Yeah. I
That's
mean,
clearly not what you believe.
I mean, if you think the way to spice the show up is this variability and not allowing teams to set up their cars, I mean, why stop there? Why doesn't F1 build the cars for each team each year and just throw them out to the teams at the start of the Grand Prix and say, good luck. Woo, that's about as variable as it gets. I mean, it's just, I don't know, it's nonsense. So,
it's like a swinger party or something. We're just going to put all the car keys into a bowl, and that's how you pick your team this year.
Right.
That'll spice it up.
Good luck. Yeah. Good luck in that Williams.
So, I would be remiss that apparently Domenicali is good friends with the team principal at Pramac Ducati. And so that's why. So apparently, if you look on the back, and this happened last year, and I never saw the sticker, but there's a little Formula One logo like on the back of Jorge Martin's bike. I was like, that apparently existed last year, and whoosh, I never saw it, but I saw it this time.
Hey, there was another Domenicali who was on the podium. Is that related?
No, they're not related.
Okay.
It would be great though. I mean, right? It's like Farley's all over again, but no.
Yeah. It was like Farley showing up at a Ford event. What?
No, they're not related, but because that's come up before too. But I think that I don't know how common Domenicali is. Maybe it's like Jones. I don't know as a last name.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to act like there's only one Domenicali family.
Duh. Yeah. No. So no, they aren't related. But I did think that was kind of interesting that it's just like, if you owned a MotoGP team. And we were friends, and I would just come over, and I'd just come hang out in your pit box and put my logo on your bike, and that's just how we roll. I was just like, who knew?
Yeah. So there you go. F1 sponsoring the Pramac Ducati team.
Yeah.
Let's see, Grace. Next story. I thought you could talk us through this one with McLaren. It's kind of like,
hey, what happened?
What happened over there, Grace? What's going on at your team?
It's getting real over there at McLaren.
It is getting real.
So, this came out like last week at this time. So they fired James Key. So to me, how do we put this? So McLaren isn't always known for having the best organizational structure. That isn't necessarily their strong suit, right? And that kind of comes from the Ron Dennis era. Like they kind of had like very matrixy, and it didn't really work. And
because they had all the people in the square building, and then you had all the people in the circle building, and it didn't really jive. And now Martin Whitmarsh is taking that to Aston Martin. Who knows, right? So they've kind of had some organizational issues over there. So I guess Stella has decided that no, he doesn't want just one tech boss anymore, right? He doesn't want everybody just answering to James Key and then James Key answering to Stella. He builds in, 3 people now that will, which you very nicely put in the notes. But right now there's 3 people that this is spread across. But what I think is interesting is that if you decided you wanted to restructure the 3 of us, you could find a way to make it work so that instead of it being you, me, Paul in that order, you could put me and Paul in the same order. But you just fired Paul, right? Like, so you didn't even try to figure out how to get James Key to work into your new organizational system. You just fired him. So I think that is the reorganization. I mean, you work at a company, I've worked at companies, they reorganize all the time, whatever. That wasn't really what stuck to me. What stuck to me was that you didn't reorganize in a way that kept Paul on the podcast. You just got rid of him, and you didn't need to do that. So clearly James Key was a problem for Stella. There seemed to be some, He's the scapegoat for the car, I would imagine. This means they're going to now have 3 experts with former Ferrari man David Sanchez on car concept, former Red Bull man Peter Prodromou on aerodynamics, and Neil, I don't know how you pronounce that, Hoodley. Sorry. I don't know Neil. Neil and I need to have a beer, and then I'll say it right. He's going to be on engineering and design. So the thought here is that all 3 should produce a better way forward than having one technical director thinly spread across the entirety of a team. But it's interesting because this is the way they used to be.
The ... designed a bad car.
Yeah, right. They used to be like this.
Yes.
And then they came in and Andrea Seidel and everybody's like, no, we're going to have James Key's the tech boss. So, now we're going backwards. And for me, the more important issue or more pressing issue, and maybe the more visible that the fans see, is that Zach went all out to get Lando and Oscar Piastri inked. And at this point, he could lose one or both drivers if the car doesn't improve quickly. And I have to think both of them have performance clauses, those kind of elements in their contracts, right?
They'll just go. Somebody will buy them out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's...
So...
you have to at least look like you're doing something, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, he's basically turned over the entire apple cart here, right? He's kicked out the main guy. We're going to do this. And, there's... if you're Lando or Oscar, I'm not always picking on Lando, but if you're Lando, you're thinking, oh my gosh.
I mean, I think especially.
I signed a long-term deal, and then Andreas Seidel, who was making serious progress, he's out. And now we have a pig of a car, and now you've got James Key out.
Right.
You got car by committee now. I mean, not building a big confidence level, I would imagine, with Lando.
Right, but I don't think you could keep it as it is either.
No, I don't. No, yeah, it's I've said it 1,000 times on this podcast, but when you're doing bad, you don't fire the whole team; you fire the coach, right?
Right.
So
that's
what they did.
Right.
Yeah.
So James Key's out because clearly, again, if they valued him, they would have kept him somewhere.
Yeah,
There's
sure.
Always, but I do think that I don't know. You've been working for long enough, just as I have, that I'm now at the age when something happens and I go, I remember back 10 years ago when we tried the same thing and boy, it didn't work then. And here we are trying it again, right? Like at some point you're around long enough that all these things come around again. So
yeah.
Here we are.
A lot of times, same results.
I know, right? But it's just like, okay, we're going to forget what you learned last time,
We're going to go through the motions again. We're going to do this. But this time it's going to be better and it's different.
It never is, but okay.
Okay.
I'm just going to sit in my little box and keep doing what I do and just leave me alone.
Right.
Let me do what I do.
Exactly. So anyway, that's what's going on at McLaren.
Yeah, I don't know. But they're supposed to have an upgrade at Baku, right? Isn't that what their upgrade's supposed to come? So
yeah.
Hopefully, because if that doesn't come through, boy, their season's really sunk.
Yeah, it's not going to look good.
Well,
let's see. Let's switch gears. Porsche is out.
I'm shocked.
Are you surprised?
Oh my God, I'm so surprised by this news.
Stunned. I'm telling you.
Surprise.
Now, I've read some, just headlines, and I've read some commentary on it and some quick comments and stuff. And I do think, to be fair, I think there's a lot more than meets the eye here. Audi is all in, and they're looking at 2026. Now, they own 25% of a team that they aren't using for their branding. Mm-hmm. So I wonder, and they said, I think in an upcoming race or something, they're going to have a big announcement. I'll be curious to see what that is from Audi. But that's Audi's world. That Audi and Porsche are both part of the VW brand.
They hired James Key.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe they hired James. Maybe McLaren didn't so much fire James as he left.
That's right.
But for Porsche, remember, Porsche started poking around, and everybody thought it was a foregone conclusion they were going to do a deal with Red Bull. But come to find out, Red Bull says no, it wasn't a fit because Porsche was wanting way too much, ownership and majority, and they wanted way too much control over the decisions and direction.
Simmer down, Porsche.
Yeah, and Red Bull is like, look, I get it, you're Porsche and all that, but we're 4 or 5-time champion Red Bull, so they're not going to just fold like a cheap tent. So then when that didn't work out, it was like, okay, well, who's Porsche talking to? Well, they must be talking about this over at Sauber, Alfa. Oh, no, Audi is buying that team. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, who's left then? We got Haas. What about Williams, et cetera, et cetera? I think F1 tried to lure manufacturers into the sport by changing these 2026 regulations, doing away with MGUH, sustainable fuels, all the different. Mm-hmm. These are things all intended to lure manufacturers back, and I think they did to a point. But I do think Porsche wasn't able. It's weird that they weren't able to find a home, and that's a bit odd given that there's Haas out there, Williams out there, possibly McLaren.
I mean, It's kind of
right?
like when we talked about Ricciardo, right?
Yeah, right.
I'm sure Ricciardo could find a driver's seat somewhere, but does he want to be at Haas?
Yeah. I think there
Right?
was some of that. It tells me that I don't know that Porsche was wanting to go into F1 to be with Williams.
Right.
And B, I do think I get the impression that the ask from Porsche was too steep to make sense for the teams. And if I'm honest, I'm not sure F1 deserves a bloody nose over this situation. I think
No.
Porsche needed to maybe lower their expectations.
Or at least be realistic. I mean, they just
Yeah.
wanted to come in and put their name on it and put their feet up on the desk
Make
and
an
be
engine.
successful, right? Like, that's not what's going to happen with Audi.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, so you're going to have to put some effort into this, even if you did buy Red Bull. But, Red Bull's not, I don't know. That just always seems like a weird proposition to say, well, but we're going to take over everything. Why? And especially not now, right? Maybe Red Bull, I don't know, some time ago when they weren't so great, maybe they would have been okay with it. But it's like, finally have a winning quarterback and you want to bring your quarterback?
Yeah,
I don't think so, right? I got Patrick Mahomes. I don't care who you're bringing to this team, right?
Right.
That's, they're on the upswing. They're really not now going to say, oh, yeah, sure, come on in. Bring all your people. We'll get rid of all our people, whatever. That's not going to happen.
And
They're
they were
successful.
already pretty well down the road on Red Bull powertrain division and had poached some people from Merck and, so.
I just think that was, I'm agreeing with you. I think that was always
Yeah.
doomed from the start. And I just don't think that was ever going to happen.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate because I feel like maybe Porsche hadn't really right-sized their expectation. I'm sure in fairness to them,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure somewhere Porsche was saying, well, look, we've got to justify our involvement in the spend, right? So in order to do that, we're going to need a certain percentage, if not controlling percentage of a team, so we can recoup and et cetera, et cetera. So I get it, but that wasn't going to work.
This is just like dating. There are two people involved, and maybe you want something, but so does that other person too. And maybe they also have hopes and dreams. And it's not just about doing what you want or appeasing your hopes and dreams, right? Like they have free will. They can decide what they want to do. And it's not just about Porsche and what you want.
That's right. That's right. It's not all about you, Porsche. You always make it about you.
Always. Marsha. But I think, they have to come to the table and say, here's what we would expect. And know that Red Bull may go, oh, that's nice. See your way out the door.
Yeah. And they're acting like a water-cooled VW or something.
That's right. Whatever, Porsche.
All right. Next up, Christian Horner waiting for the other technical directive shoe to drop.
Oh, my goodness, Christian Horner.
I got a lot of Christian Horner for you. I know
he's my favorite. I know, right?
I know.
You're cutting my MotoGP coverage in order to talk about Christian Horner. This is the greatest podcast ever.
Right. You remember that technical directive that the FIA released mid-year last year that had to do with the porpoising and the underfloors and the height and all that? Remember that?
The build a better car? Yes.
Yeah, you remember?
Build a better car technical directive? Yes.
Yeah, and they kind of did that on Mercedes' behalf to raise the car because Mercedes is having issues with it. And this was intended to hobble those that had figured it out,
Right.
You figured out how to get it. Oh, good for you. But if somebody gets killed, I'm coming
It's
for you.
a safety issue, right?
Yeah. You've got a problem with your car. Change your effing car.
Right.
So they did this to try to benefit Mercedes, and Mercedes kind of felt like hopefully that following race that it would sort of hobble Red Bull a little bit. It didn't.
No.
Okay, so my point here is that technical directives do happen, and teams lobby really hard to get technical directives to slow down their competition. So if they feel like something is a real advantage, they'll try to lobby the FIA to take a look at it because it's maybe flouting the regulations or the regulations aren't clear enough and there needs to be a technical directive to finer details of the regulations, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So Horner said that's what he's expecting to happen this season if fans are basically at this point robe ripping and teeth gnashing over Red Bull dominance so far this season. It's only 2 races, but never mind that. He said, quote, "There's always something, always a technical directive that drops, a game changer." And he said that he has little doubt that any such move would come in the wake of pressure from Red Bull's rivals, basically lobbying lawmakers to make these changes. He said, "You can guarantee that the others will be scheming. How can we slow them down? It's part of the game. Having lived through it before, you become more seasoned in how you write it out." End quote.
Having lived through it before,
Just
because
last year.
I did that to other people, not last
I'm
year.
sure he
but,
has.
Right? Like,
Yeah, I'm
I
sure
know
he
how
has.
the game is played. I've been on the other side of the trying to get
Yeah.
technical directives written against my teammates. I know exactly how this works,
Yeah,
right?
I'm sure he does.
Yes.
Um,
I like how that quote makes it sound like, oh, they're just trying to kill me. Like,
Yeah.
woe is me, Red. Get out of here, Christian Horner.
They always go after the people winning.
That's
true.
right. I've never done that though.
No, never. You remember I said, on the Sunday after the Saudi Arabia race, I mentioned it in the race review, and then on Monday's podcast I did. Remember I said that the FIA, I feel like, might take a long look at their Red Bull's DRS? I suspect that may be the most low-hanging fruit right now. And I said at the time, it would not shock me in the next few weeks if the FIA take a long look at that DRS system with the single wing in the back instead of the dual, and how it interacts with that. So my hunch is that may be the low-hanging fruit here. He also said that, let's see, the team last year, now this is interesting. I got a little tea for you, Grace.
Okay. Ooh,
He said that last year, when they were going through the cost cap crisis, if you will, the CCC, he said that, I know, terrible.
That's great.
He said last year that there were a team last year contacted Red Bull sponsors in a very underhanded way. He said, quote, "These things get used by your rivals. We had one of them contacting our sponsors and partners, making suggestions that we would be bringing their brands into disrepute. That was just underhanded," end quote. I mean, I can't imagine. He didn't name names, Zach, but
not.
I'm thinking that, maybe you would know better than anyone about sponsors, and so I thought that was interesting.
That was great. That is great. This is just like, oh man, it's like a Drive to Survive. Christian Horner is taking over everywhere.
I know. Next year they have a whole episode on Christian.
I mean, it really is just going to be Christian Horner and Gunther Steiner. What else are we watching this Netflix show for, right?
Yeah. Well, I can only take so many F-bombs from Gunther.
I don't know, man. But I don't know. I always think this is like suspecting the other person of cheating because you're the one that's cheating. Like, not in a like in an interpersonal dating way. Like, well, I don't know. She's at the club all the time. How do you know? Well, I'm at the club all the time. Okay, maybe it's not her. Maybe it's you, right? And you're telling on yourself because you start suspecting these behaviors in other people. That is how I read this. Like, again, because I would never. My little halo. I know people that aren't watching this, right? Like, oh, my little halo. I'm Christian Horner. I would never do these things. Get out of here, dude.
Yeah.
You all do this. All of you.
All the teams do it. They all lobby for
Of course you
directives.
do.
Yes. Speaking of the cost cap crisis, it seems also, Grace, that the FIA is discussing some alterations to the cost cap.
What kind of alterations?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Apparently, do you remember this young, plucky new team manager named James Vowles?
I've heard of him.
Yeah. Yeah, dashingly handsome young man who just took the helm of Williams. Well, he got over there, and besides finding out that they still are using a 1989 Mr. Coffee in the coffee room and in the break room,
right?
They're out of filters. He's figured out that the machinery that they have unlike the big teams, their machinery is really old or non-existent at all.
Just because, Williams' wind tunnel is like a jack in the box and some guy cranks it and he goes ding, 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 ding. Right. That's how it works.
It's 15 employees over there going,
yeah.
That's what it is.
Human hamster wheels or something. Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or fans, hand fans. Yes, so he was quite stunned to see the lack of sophisticated machinery as well as the aged machinery, and he was stunned that the team was able to assemble, to build, to design, fabricate, and assemble 15,000 parts, which constitutes their car. He was stunned. Now, this has prompted a conversation about the cost cap regarding CapEx expenditures. For those of you that aren't accountants, that's capital expenditure, which means buying equipment, buildings, and those kind of things. So there is discussion over the cost cap regarding CapEx expenditures, and for that reason, they may be working on increasing this amount so small teams can update their machinery to equal the large teams in order to compete on a fairer level. Now, at one blush, you would think the cost cap is really working because it's preventing the top teams from outspending everyone, and it's been great for the small teams. Well, not necessarily, because of the cost cap. With the CapEx, that means the small teams can't improve their machinery. Right. So Toto is wandering around the hallowed halls of Mercedes with the 2022 autoclave where he bakes Lewis Hamilton's new car. Meanwhile, over at Williams, their autoclave is like a pizza oven, right. And they're sliding their car in and out, and they can't update it because they can't afford, and the cost cap is limiting buying a new autoclave, right? So
there's only so much you can do with balsa wood, masking tape,
yes.
duct tape, and some Flex Seal, right?
It's funny you say that because most people wouldn't think so, but yes, you're right.
You can fix a bathtub with some Flex Seal, but I don't know.
Sure you can. Sure you can. I don't know. I'm hard pressed to think of anything you can't fix with Flex Seal.
Hi, Phil Swift here for Flex Seal.
You know what I'm saying?
That's right. I do, exactly. But I think that, of course, duh. I'm sure that, this has to be some sort of, James Vaught had some expectation that things at Williams were not the same as Mercedes, but clearly...
I'm going to say they were slightly higher.
Yeah, this is not what he was expecting. It was sort of like, how do you people live like this? How do you build a car? I don't understand. So clearly he was probably really flabbergasted, because you're right. If Mercedes is at a 10, he was expecting a 6, and he's getting a 2, and he's just really just perplexed by how do you guys even make it to the grid? So rubbing these two sticks together and hoping it works.
I think it sounds like he walked into the cafeteria and said, "Who's got the ramen noodles on this hot plate in here?
Yeah,
what's this all about? And whose Wonder Woman lunchbox is this?
I don't know
what's going on."
It all belongs probably to Alex Albon, but I think that
probably
yeah. And, and I think that the other small teams and, Claire Williams are like, yeah, duh.
Yeah. See what I was doing?
I tried to tell you this, nobody wanted to hear it. Oh, I see how it is. Now you're here, James. And now you think it's his problem. Yeah.
Right.
Surprise.
Right. I would imagine the accountants at Doralton Capital probably see his caller ID. Oh, don't answer it. He's wanting money.
No,
don't answer it.
I'm sorry. We're going through a tunnel.
Yeah. Oh, that's going to voicemail right there. Thank you for calling Doralton Capital.
Yes.
Please leave your name and number, and we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can.
Seems like I left my phone in the autoclave that we don't have. I left it in Mercedes. Autoclave.
Can't hear you. I'm in the wind tunnel.
Crank faster.
Yeah. Poor James. James is going to end up being the MacGyver of team bosses.
Yeah, hook him up with some hockey tickets.
I know. He's going to end up having to try to win a race with a toothpick, a rubber band, and some Elmer's glue or something. It's going to be bizarre.
That's right.
Yeah. So anyway, watch the space. We'll see if Formula One officially agrees to allow James Vowles and Williams to either buy new machinery or upgrade machinery? And perhaps more importantly, B, is Doralton Capital going to pony up the millions that it's going to take to update or buy said new equipment?
They didn't get into this to spend money, sir.
Yeah, right. So they go, it would be funny to go all the trouble to get the regulations changed and Doralton say, well, yeah, but, well, we didn't talk about adding another 20 million to your budget. No.
Right. So here's what I imagine. Drive to Survive next season. They're going to be at some team boss meeting, and Toto and Fred and Christian Horner are going to be yelling at each other. And Toto's going to go, James. And he's just going to be in the fetal position underneath some chairs in the corner. James, what do you think? And he's just rocking back and forth because that's all he's got at this point. And what was he thinking?
Yeah, he's got to be thinking, yeah, this is a huge challenge.
Yeah.
I'm either going to be a hero or a zero.
And most likely a zero. I mean, I think that
I wouldn't delete Toto's number off your mobile.
No, I hope you didn't burn any bridges when you left, sir.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I just think, I just think he's going to have like a shell shock. Whereas Yas was much more the lean back, crosses his arms, like whatever you guys are going to talk about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know that that's really James Val's style. I think it's.
No, I don't think so. I think he's a little
under
more
some
animated.
chairs. Yeah, he's just going to be a little rough for you.
Yeah, probably will. Here's what I'm hoping to happen. I hope they are the little team that could, like Thomas the Tank Engine and not Naughty Diesel. And I'm hoping they can achieve and really start to see them and win races and all that. So I'm cheering for you, James. Just want you to know that.
Yeah, everybody's cheering for Williams. We have
Who's
been
not cheering for Williams?
The last 15 years, but
Right. Who out there hates Williams? Just you can share it with the comment section of this podcast. Who out there absolutely hates that team or dislikes that team?
How can you hate
them?
them?
And why? That's what I'd like to know.
I mean, I could see being neutral.
Yes.
I have no affect one way or the other. Neutral.
Right.
That I understand. But just being like, yo, I hate those jerk faces. I don't see. Right. So
see, I've been around long enough that I like all the teams. That's my problem. Because, that team was Tyrrell, or that was Jaguar, or that was Jackie Stewart's team.
Well, but see, I also think that's the reason to carry like long-standing beefs, right?
For sure, yeah. You bring up a good point. It's like you and Ferrari, right?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Or me and Michael Andretti. It's not like that happened yesterday, but I'll forgive him for that. So
right.
It's fine.
Yeah. So you get those long.
Yeah, right.
Bitter...
So like the longer you're in, the longer you have more knowledge of which to like or dislike somebody with.
Right. It's a good point.
I just think I just think that's what you got. Whoever ends up buying Red Bull someday, I can't like you.
That's right.
Sorry. It's like the Browns. It's like when the Browns became the Ravens. I can't root for the Ravens. You're the Browns. I'm a Steelers fan. That is never okay. You always be the Browns.
You can't do that.
Even after they brought the Browns back, I still can't support you. Neither of you.
You're dead to me.
That's right. All of them.
Let's do some Alvin's Cats.
Get down.
Yes, Grace. What do you got?
Maybe that's the music that comes out of Williams's wind tunnel when they crank the. Yeah.
It's a big calliope, and instead of horse, it's got the car mounted on there, and it goes around and around.
And it's just a monkey, with the cymbals, right?
Yeah.
What? Oh my goodness! What have you people been doing? Right? This mental image just brings me joy. This is just an episode of Drive to Survive waiting to happen.
It is.
James Val walking in with his box, with his plant, his picture of Toto, ready to set up his new office. And boy, things got real fast.
James got his potted plant there, and the only picture he's got on his desk is an 8x10 glossy signed by Toto.
Yeah, exactly.
I like
exactly.
That.
That's it. And
best wishes, Toto.
Yeah, he's just sharpening pencils, right? What else can he do?
Right. Right.
Poor guy. Okay, so I did want to just mention that we did have a race in Saudi Arabia, and
We
it was a snoozer, but Magic Alonso. So Alonso 08 continues, and so I would be remiss if I didn't bring that up, even though I really have no other highlights from that race that I would like to share.
Right.
So there you go. It wasn't the most exciting race, but it's only race number 2. We're fine.
Yeah.
It's they all aren't bangers. It's all right.
No, they're not. We got a long ways to go.
That's right. So then I did also, however, want to, of course, recenter this whole conversation back onto MotoGP because that is what I want to do. So I know I had mentioned this to you, but I didn't know if you actually watched any of the Marc Marquez documentary, but he's put out a documentary. It's 5 episodes. It's called All In. It's on Amazon Prime. And I think
he's all in.
If our compelling narrative hasn't been enough to convince you to watch MotoGP, I think give that a whirl. I thought I thought it was great. Did you watch it?
Not yet.
Okay. Oh, I don't want to spoil it then, but
don't spoil it.
I do think there's some maybe I'll wait till we'll just bring it up again after you do watch it, but I do think there's some great moments, great observations. It is directed by him and his brother, so there's always that kind of like how polished is it, or how what did they show and what did they not show. But I think there's at no point Marquez is all in, and he is very vulnerable throughout the whole documentary. So I don't think that it always anyway.
Did they have any sound bites of Nick Harris?
No, I was waiting for that.
Does anybody have anything from Marquez?
That did not get carried in, but it is, it's interesting. So I was listening to the Race Does a MotoGP podcast, and so I was listening to that, and one of the things they were talking about how what is interesting
is it all Mitchell mommed too, or is it somebody else?
No, he only does Formula One.
Oh, okay.
No, it's Simon and Val and Matt Beers.
Okay.
Toby Moody
Beer
does.
Matt.
Yeah.
I've met Beer Matt.
So Toby Moody does the off week. He's now going to do a series of interviews and stuff for the off race weeks.
The Tobster.
Yeah,
yes.
But Toby Moody's involved with it too. So,
gotcha.
And they were talking about how it's really interesting because as a nerd, which first of all, I think that's funny that they're like, well, if you're not an anorak, and then they kind of go, well, you're listening to this podcast, you're probably an anorak, right? Yes, you're listening to an hour podcast about MotoGP. Right. You might know some things, you might be into it.
Yeah.
But they talk about how what's going to happen, but you're watching Marc Marquez, who doesn't know what's going to happen, right? You've read the end of the book and he hasn't. And, it reminded me very much of what was very poignant to me about the Senna movie was that you watch Roland Ratzenberger die, the last page of that story, and he doesn't. And that's so, to me, especially when I watched it the first time, I'm watching it with my friend, and he's like, oh, you know how this ends? And I'm like, yeah, but I never had seen that. I'd never seen that footage of him watching this and lamenting what happened and deciding if he should race or not. And the whole time you're just like, don't go. But he goes, what happens, right? You know how the story ends. And so
it was like, no, Jack, don't let go. I know the Titanic sinks, but he didn't know.
Right. Just stay on my door on this.
Yes, stay on the door. Don't go.
So it is interesting that there were several moments where you're like, but how it ends, but yet Marc Marquez doesn't. And so I highly recommend it, even if you aren't into MotoGP. I think that it's a great human story. I think that, you really get some insight into his relationship with his brother, which I think is really,
Alex.
Yes, his brother, Alex, and who is still in MotoGP.
Who did well. He was in 4th.
Unlike this weekend where everybody else fell out of the race. But yes.
He finished 4th. He did a great job.
Yeah, Alex should do really well this season. I think that people have a lot of high expectations for him. And so, but it was fun to kind of see their relationship with each other and kind of how they support each other. And you get to see his mom and his dad and, who, if you watch MotoGP, you see a lot of his dad. So I don't want to spoil it, but we'll revisit it after you watch it.
All right.
And then we'll just spoil it for everybody else.
We'll spoil it for everyone.
Watch it in the meantime. I highly recommend it. It's
perfect. Like
5 half-hour episodes. What are you doing on a Saturday?
Yeah.
Give it a watch.
Okay. I'll watch it.
There you go. It's really good.
Cool. All right. You want some no shit headlines?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. First one up. Here we go. Quote, heat exhaustion hampers Button's NASCAR debut. Did you see the interview Paul sent us with JB? Saying he almost had to pull over because he was completely dehydrated, had heat exhaustion.
Yes.
Yeah. He found out those NASCAR boys drive differently, didn't he?
Yeah, he sure did. I like that one of the bumps was from Kimmy. That was great.
Yeah, one of the big bumps was from Kimi. That comports. You know?
Yeah, right. I just like that.
Kimi's like, I've done this before. Boom.
I've done this in trucks. Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought that was great. It was funny and to kind of watch how he responded to it, and that I like that he said like I enjoyed 60% of the race, so I assume he enjoyed like 40% of the race, right?
Yeah.
Like that was him trying to be generous. I don't know that he's going to be doing this again anytime soon.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how long he hangs on doing that with all the rubbing his racing thing.
Yeah.
So watch this space. Let's see what else. Oh, here quote. Horner on shock Hamilton move. Red Bull can't accommodate him. End quote. Now, this is such a crap headline because who said that Hamilton was moving to Red Bull or was even thinking about moving to Red Bull? This is such a manufactured story.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. It's Horner on shock Hamilton move. He's not moving.
Right.
Or at least it's, I don't know. That's just the press. That's a shit headline. This one was so fun.
That's not a no shit headline. That's just a shit headline.
It's just a shit headline, period.
All right.
Yeah, you need to, whoever's doing that, you're paying them too much. This is a delightful one. Quote, I'm the world's sexiest racing driver. I love Lewis Hamilton and posing in bikinis for my 2.3 million Instagram followers. Now, I know many of you are going to think that that was Paul Charsley.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But it's not Paul. Yeah. So I can't even remember the young woman's name. But yeah, so there you go. World's sexiest racing car driver who loves Lewis Hamilton and loves posing in bikinis. Okay, got it. And this one, to round out this portion of the podcast, this is such a fun one. Mm-hmm. Quote, who is Jensen Button's ex-wife, Jessica Michibata, and why has she been arrested?
What?
Did we all were just talking about Jessica just a couple of years ago?
Yeah.
Is there still confusion about who Jessica Michibata was?
I don't know. Why was she arrested?
Drugs.
Oh.
So let that be a lesson to you, children.
I guess.
Don't marry Jensen Button and then go down a spiral of decay and entropy, okay?
Maybe she's friends with Nicole Sertenzer. Maybe they've formed a little, little group.
Could be. Ex-F1 girlfriends, right?
Yeah.
Could be. So there you go. All right, let's do some mailbag. There's some of that.
You've got mail.
Peter, our friend Peter asks, first great podcast on Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. Very informative. Thanks, Peter. The questions. I'm going to guess on these, Peter. I ran out of time to go look it up. But I know.
Welcome to my world.
This, if I could get, Huxley.
And
Atticus, if I could get our interns to do anything.
Before you go on to this story or answering this mailbag, I do want to note that when people watch MotoGP, enjoy all the aero that showed up on every bike now, except for the Honda, because that's where Honda has not, they are like, have no aero, and that's been a problem for them. But especially Aprilia, that wing on the front is beautiful. Aprilia will, like, if you tell them this wiggly stick is going to make you faster, they will glue that to wherever you want. They have a wiggly bit on the swing arm on the on the wheel of the bike. It's great. So if you like aero, this is all the more reason to get into MotoGP, because they are like the height of aero right now. That is all over the place right now, except for Honda, who refuses.
Yeah.
But yeah, check that out. There's some fun swiggly bits.
Many years ago, I used to chat with some MotoGP guys that did content for MotoGP. Mm-hmm. And I remember asking them about, I said, well, I don't know. I mean, it seems like to me they'd have more, aero streaks and wings. They're like, what? Get out of here.
Yeah,
no.
Nobody does that.
No, everybody thought I was crazy for talking about aero. And look, here we have
Apparently. Not Aprilia. Apparently,
No,
they
yeah,
listened.
right. Well, they don't need it. They just power through it. So
I mean-
anyway, Peter, I'm guessing on this. I didn't look it up, but any of you listeners out there, please correct me if I'm wrong. Peter's question is: was the instruction to Perez to hold station, not push, before or after Max was asking to leapfrog? I think it was before.
Wouldn't it have to be before?
Yeah, I think it
It's
was
not a very good
before.
story otherwise.
Right. I think they came out and told them both to hold at that
Yeah.
time.
And Max said, "Nah, dog," and passed him.
Right. Right. Second question you had was Max's complaint about mysterious noises before or after he was told they would not be giving Perez team orders? He said, my thought it was after he was petulantly making excuses for not passing. You could be right on that. I don't remember exactly. It seems like replaying it in my head, it seems like it was before, but I could be totally wrong there. I think you may be right. It could have been after. So anyhow, good questions. All you listeners out there, let us know. And thanks for the questions, Peter, as always. And then finally, our friend Steve Moore says, hey, Todd and Grace, just a comment. He's just a comment. He's saying, he's not asking. Stephen doesn't need to ask. He knows the answers to all of his questions.
There you go.
He is making a point here. He says, just a comment. I tried watching the NASCAR race at COTA on Sunday. Loved watching Jordan Taylor, Kimi, JB, and Connor Daly, but ended up watching most of the race on mute. I'll never complain about Crofty again. Did you watch it? What happened to poor Steve? Was Larry Mack on there yelling at you, making you feel scolded?
Wasn't it Gunther?
JB, going too wide. Get in your room, pick up your socks.
That I would listen to. No, wasn't it Gunther Steiner was on the broadcast team?
Was he? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't watch NASCAR. I did not watch this.
I didn't watch it. I know a lot of Formula One fans did because you had Kibi and JB in it. And I know, so they were just, I don't know if they were just working out of, they were mortified or what the deal was, but
I don't know. I had 12 hours of MotoGP coverage to watch. I don't know what happened in the NASCAR.
Yeah, right.
People.
There's a lot of MotoGP going on there.
I don't know. I mean, I did not watch it. I mean, somebody asked on Twitter and I was like, it sounds great except for the NASCAR part. I didn't watch it,
Right.
I'm not going to watch it. So, I mean, if I don't watch Daytona, I'm not going to watch. I mean, I get it. People watch COTA, right? That, like you were saying, because the Formula One drivers in it, but I'm not watching it. Thanks.
Yeah. So there, Grace ain't doing it. She's not watching it.
I broke up with NASCAR 20 years ago, and that's it. I'm not going back.
Somebody says, hey, Grace, there's a NASCAR race on this weekend.
Well, Lottie frickin' God!
Couldn't care less.
I don't.
Nope. Doesn't care.
Help me, Tom Cruise!
No, especially because their season is like, it has to be like 60 races long by this point. I mean, it was already like...
there was all this hubbub about Kaibu or Kubu or one of them, and I don't was it Kyle Busch? I don't know. Anyway, I can't follow it. And then when they get to the whole playoffs thing, it takes an Excel spreadsheet to figure out what the hell's going on there. And you lost me. And it's not that F1 isn't complicated too, but there's only so much space in my head.
Well, and I think it's NASCAR is also complicated to make it more entertaining, right? Like, I mean, yes, Formula One is complicated, but and it
doesn't make it more entertaining.
No, well, that's true too. But I mean, even just talking about like how points are awarded, that side of it, like we all know that I love it when it's like, Checo could win if Max Verstappen doesn't finish the last 7 races and Jenson Button comes back and runs over Kimi Räikkönen, right? Like, I love these like crazy permutations they come up with, but that's just still based on straight points. That's not what NASCAR does. NASCAR, I mean, I don't know why they don't just like have March Madness brackets or something at this point. Like, it's just totally craziness to just try to, I guess that's what they really did try to do, was kind of make it a March Madness kind of feel to it. But I don't even know what they do now in the last 10 races or whatever. I can't, again, I can't. You get points. You don't have to like reshuffle people, or just these 10 people have the chance of winning the cup, and these other people keep racing, but
why don't they
can't
just
win
go
it.
home?
I don't, you're just driving in circles for nothing.
Right.
I don't know.
So you got 10 cars that are going for a cup, and the other 78 cars are what, just on an elaborate, expensive test session?
I guess. I mean, I don't even know how they do it now. That's how, when they first started doing the, chase, whatever, that's what it was. Like that you got in that top 10, and those are the only ones that could like win.
Yeah, maybe they changed it.
I don't know. The other 80 cars, I don't know what they're doing. So
yeah, right.
I have no idea. And
me neither.
It's NASCAR.
I gotta learn it.
I gotta leave the house sometime.
I know. That's what I was saying. I don't have time to learn it. So,
All
right. Well, that does it for this podcast. That's what we think about the news this week. Let us know what you think about the news, and let us know about any news that we may have missed that you think is important. You can do that in the comments section. You go to theparcfermé.com. Just do it with decorum and civility as always. That's the one rule we have. A huge, huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. We could not and would not do this podcast without you. This podcast, just for our Patreon supporters, is ad-free, and it's posted at our Patreon page. So any of you Patreon supporters out there who want to support us even further, then by all means, go and download it from your favorite podcast player, and it'll have ads, and you'll be helping us. That's great. But if you'd like to exercise your Patreon given right, you could go to Patreon, our page on there, log in as a Patreon supporter, and every time we release a podcast, like later on this evening, it will be up there too, and you can download it, right? And you can get an RSS feed, and you can download it there commercial free. So there you go.
Woohoo!
So anyway, huge thanks to all of you. And gosh, I guess we got the Australian Grand Prix coming up. So I'm going to have to find Paul, fresh off of his anniversary, I might add.
Yeah, lovely.
Down in Nolans.
Yeah, New Orleans. Yeah, New Orleans. I don't know. Right.
Yeah, down there. So anyway, that should be fun. So until next week, we'll do it all over again. But until that time, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camber, saying so long, Grace.
See you in a couple weeks.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.